The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe episode 18, The Art of Enough, Rest, Contentment and Peace in a Hyperworld. Welcome back to The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe, the space where we strip back the noise, step out of autopilot, and sit with the truths we often rush past. Today we're slowing things right down. In a world that glorifies speed, productivity, and the endless chase for more, this is an episode about the radical act of saying enough. We'll explore what happens when you release the grip of hustle culture, stop measuring your worth by output, and start tuning into the quieter, steadier rhythms of your own life. Because rest isn't laziness, it's maintenance. Contentment isn't giving up, it's arriving. And peace isn't found in constant striving, it's often waiting in the pauses we're too busy to take. We'll dive into the cultural and psychological roots of never enough, why slowing down can feel so uncomfortable at first, and how to reclaim a sense of worth that isn't chained to performance. You'll hear personal reflections, grounded psychological insight, and simple, practical ways to live at your own pace without fear of falling behind. So take a breath, let's begin. The weight of more theme, the societal pressure of constant striving and its impact on rest and self-worth. Context. In a hyper-connected world, our value is often measured by speed, output, and visibility. Rest is reframed as a luxury rather than a basic need, creating a quiet but corrosive tension between our body's need for recovery and our culture's demand for constant motion. Attributes: hustle conditioning, the learned habit of measuring worth by productivity. Context. This conditioning often begins early, reinforced by school systems that reward constant achievement and punish slowing down. Over time, it becomes second nature to feel anxious when not producing something tangible. Scarcity mindset, the belief that there's never enough time, success, or resources. Context. Even in abundance, this mindset fuels overwork. We are perpetually striving for security, believing rest will cost us opportunities we can't afford to miss. Performance pressure, the internalized expectation to always be on and proving ourselves. Context. This is the invisible weight carried in everyday interactions, from feeling the need to look busy in an office to curating an online presence that signals ambition and worthiness. I must do more from the moment we wake. We're fed the gospel of more. More emails to send, more opportunities to seize, more habits to optimize. We measure our lives in output, the way a factory measures production lines, forgetting that factories shut down for maintenance, yet we rarely do. Even our moments of pause are often dressed up as productivity. Rest becomes self-care to recharge for work, not an act worthy in its own right. Social media has only sharpened this conditioning. Every scroll becomes a performance review, a silent comparison against the curated milestones of others. It's easy to feel that if we stop moving, we'll be overtaken, forgotten, or labeled as unmotivated. We live in a paradox, exhausted by the chase, yet afraid of what will happen if we step off the track. And in that fear, we forget the truth. There's no finish line to this race, just a shifting horizon that always demands one more push. Personal reflection. For years, I treated rest as a form of debt repayment, something I had to earn by working myself into the ground. Even then, the rest I gave myself wasn't restorative. I'd binge-watch shows while my mind replayed my to-do list, or I'd spend a weekend off answering emails under the pretense of keeping my plate clear. Deep down, I was terrified that slowing down would make me irrelevant, that people would forget my work, or that opportunities would pass me by. It wasn't until working on the Inversiverse that I noticed the contradiction. I could speak eloquently about resisting systems of control, yet I'd been quietly enforcing hustle culture on myself. My identity had been hijacked by the need to prove my value through constant creation. The first time I deliberately took a whole day to do nothing, without guilt, it felt almost rebellious, like I was breaking an unspoken law. And in a way I was. That day didn't make me less, it gave me more clarity, more groundedness, and ironically, more creative energy when I returned. Psychological insight. This struggle is deeply rooted in what psychologists and sociologists call internalized capitalism, the process of absorbing the logic of productivity, efficiency, and competition into our self-identity. When you internalize these values, rest doesn't just feel unproductive, it feels wrong. Research by Deci and Ryan, 1985, in Self-Determination Theory shows that when self-worth is tied to external achievements, known as contingent self-esteem, intrinsic motivation and well-being are compromised. A personal example: during a particularly intense creative period, I finished a major project ahead of schedule. By all logic, I'd earned rest. Instead, I spent the next 2 days frantically trying to start something new, not because I had a meaningful idea, but because I feared the gap between projects would make people forget me. That's the trap, mistaking constant output for security. It took deliberate reframing to see rest not as absence, but as an essential part of the cycle of creation. Insight prompt: when was the last time you truly rested without justifying it? And how did that feel in your body? Theory in action for 1 week. Replace the phrase "I deserve rest" with "rest is necessary." Remove achievement as a prerequisite. Notice if your body feels different when rest is permission, not a reward. The weight of always on theme, perpetual alertness, the exhausting expectation, both internal and external, that we should be available, responsive, and on at all times. This isn't just about work, it's woven into our social lives and relationships too. Technology has made it easy to be reached 24/7, but it's also normalized the idea that not responding instantly signals disinterest, laziness, or neglect. Over time, this erodes our ability to rest without guilt. Attributes: hustle conditioning, the learned habit of measuring worth by productivity. Context: this conditioning often starts early, with gold stars for perfect attendance, praise for going above and beyond in school projects. Later, it becomes self-policing, where even on weekends or holidays, we feel uneasy unless we're ticking something off the list. Scarcity mindset, the belief that there's never enough time, success, or resources. Context: this mindset thrives on fear, the fear that opportunities are fleeting, that slowing down means someone else will overtake us. Even in abundance, it drives overwork and makes rest feel like a luxury we can't afford. Performance pressure, the internalized expectation to always be proving ourselves. Context: in professional life, this can look like answering emails at 10 p.m. just to be seen as dedicated. In personal life, it might be showing up to every social event even when exhausted, just so we're not the one who never comes out. The whisper that becomes a roar at first, the always-on expectation can feel like ambition, the push to grow, to seize opportunities, to prove yourself capable. You might even feel proud of your responsiveness, the way you never let a message sit unanswered or an opportunity slip by. But over time, the line between dedication and depletion blurs. That low hum of alertness in your body, the one you think is normal, begins to sound more like a constant alarm. It's in the way you check your phone at midnight, just in case. The way you hesitate to silence notifications, because of what if you miss something important. The way you start to resent interruptions, but still say yes to them because no feels dangerous. Before you realize it, the very habits that once made you feel secure now keep you from ever feeling truly at ease. And the scariest part, you might not even remember what it feels like to be truly off duty. Personal reflection. I didn't see my hustle conditioning until I took my first real break in years. Not a weekend, not a few days off, but a full 2 weeks. I told myself I'd use it to rest, but by day 2, I was restless. I kept thinking about projects, checking my phone, and drafting ideas in my head. It was like I didn't know how to exist without producing something. One evening, I sat on a balcony watching the sunset. It should have been peaceful, but instead of feeling present, I was planning how I'd post about it later, framing the shot, choosing the caption. That's when I realized, even in stillness, I was performing. Not for anyone specific, but for the invisible audience in my head. Breaking that pattern wasn't a single decision. It was dozens of micro decisions, letting messages wait until morning, resisting the urge to fill every spare hour, reminding myself that worth isn't measured in output. The quiet felt uncomfortable at first, almost accusatory. But slowly I started to feel something else, space. And that space wasn't empty. It was the beginning of peace. Psychological insight, perpetual alertness, engages the body's sympathetic nervous system, the same system that controls our fight or flight response. When it's always active, we're essentially living in a state of chronic microstress. According to polyvagal theory, Porges, 2011, our nervous system needs time in the ventral vagal state, a physiological mode of safety and connection, to restore balance and health. Without it, even our rest is restless. From a cognitive perspective, this also links to self-determination theory, Deshi and Ryan, 2000, which suggests that autonomy, competence, and relatedness are core human needs. When we're trapped in hustle conditioning, autonomy is compromised. We're no longer choosing to be on, we're compelled. This erodes intrinsic motivation and leaves us relying on external validation to feel safe. I learned this personally when I realized that even on days off, I'd check my analytics for the Inversiverse and the Unfiltered Human on the Fringe. It wasn't about inspiration, it was about reassurance. And the irony was, the reassurance never lasted. The numbers might quiet the doubt for an hour, but the hunger for more came back stronger. It wasn't until I started scheduling deliberate no work, no performance windows into my week, time that didn't produce anything, I felt the difference in my body. My breathing slowed, my shoulders dropped, and for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't waiting for a signal to spring back into action. Insight prompt. Where in your life do you mistake constant accessibility for commitment? Very in action, try a signal off window. For 1 hour each day, turn off all notifications and resist checking messages. Notice the discomfort and the relief that comes from knowing the world will wait. The cost of chasing more theme, the endless ladder, the cycle of reaching one milestone only to immediately set the next, without pausing to appreciate the ground already covered. This pattern thrives in environments that equate movement with progress, encouraging us to treat each achievement not as fulfillment, but as proof we should aim higher. It's a loop that can rob even our victories of joy. Attributes, moving goalposts, the habit of shifting success criteria as soon as one is met. Context. This creates a constant sense of insufficiency, no matter how much is accomplished. You reach the dream job, and almost instantly it becomes a stepping stone to something bigger. The satisfaction window is so small, you hardly notice it's there. Delayed fulfillment trap, postponing contentment until the next achievement. Context. This mindset tells us we'll finally relax when the next raise, the next house, the next perfect relationship arrives. In reality, the finish line is always moving, so the moment of rest never comes. Comparison loop. Measuring progress against others rather than your values. Context. Social media amplifies this, feeding a curated highlight reel that makes even our wins feel small. It's not enough to achieve something. It has to look impressive in comparison to everyone else's version. The celebration that never happens. Imagine running a race, crossing the finish line, and instead of stopping to breathe, drink water, and feel the rush of accomplishment, someone immediately points to another track and says, "Quick, you're up again." You barely have time to register the win before you're already sprinting toward next goal. That's how many of us live without realizing it. We get the job we wanted, but instead of letting it sink in, we're already angling for the promotion. We pay off debt, but before the relief settles, we're calculating the next financial target. The moments we think will feel like arrival end up feeling more like transitions. This isn't just ambition, it's a learned inability to inhabit satisfaction. And over time, the cost isn't just exhaustion, it's a gradual erosion of meaning. If everything is just a step toward the next thing, when do we ever feel like we've truly arrived? Personal reflection. I've lived this pattern more times than I'd like to admit. When the Inversiverse hit its first big milestone, I thought I'd feel proud, and I did for about an afternoon. By the next morning, I was obsessing over the next stage, how to grow it further, what content needed to come next, how to keep the momentum going. It's not that ambition is bad, it's that I never gave myself the grace to celebrate before pushing ahead. I remember one night, after finishing a particularly complex episode, instead of relaxing, I was already researching the next one. Friends would congratulate me, and I'd nod politely while my mind was somewhere else entirely. Looking back, I can see how this robbed me of the joy I'd worked so hard for. It wasn't until I intentionally built in moments of pause, not just rest, but actual recognition of what I'd achieved, that I realized how much I'd been missing. And the strangest part, the work didn't suffer. If anything, it improved, because I was no longer running on a half-empty tank. Psychological insight. This cycle is closely tied to hedonic adaptation, Brickman and Campbell, 1971, the tendency to quickly return to a baseline level of satisfaction after positive changes. It's why the thrill of a new achievement fades faster than we expect, and why, without conscious intervention, we'll chase the next hit without ever feeling done. It also connects to self-worth contingency theory, Crocker and Wolf, 2001, which explains how basing self-esteem on achievement creates a fragile sense of identity. When worth is tied to constant output, pausing feels unsafe, as if stillness will make us irrelevant. I've seen this in my own life when working on book projects. After finishing My Inner Child Was Broken, there was a brief glowing sense of fulfillment, but within days I was outlining my next idea. It wasn't that the first project didn't matter. It's that my brain was conditioned to see the completion as a checkpoint, not a destination. It took deliberately journaling about what I was proud of and reading those entries back later to slow the adaptation and let the satisfaction land. Insight prompt. What's one recent achievement you moved past too quickly? What would it look like to revisit and savor it now? Theory in action schedule a recognition ritual for your next milestone, whether it's a quiet dinner, a journal entry, or a shared toast with friends. Make the pauses non-negotiable as the work that got you there. The fear of falling behind theme, time anxiety, the persistent feeling that you're running out of time to make it or do enough with your life. This is often fueled by cultural narratives about timelines when we should have a career, a home, a partner, or certain accomplishments. It creates an invisible race where every moment of rest feels like you're slipping further behind. Attributes. Chronological comparison, measuring life stages against peers or cultural norms. Context. We absorb milestones from the world around us. Graduate by 22, be married by 30, own a house by 35. And when our path diverges, it can feel like failure, even when our actual priorities are different. Productivity as security, believing that constant output is the only way to safeguard the future. Context. In uncertain economies or unstable industries, this belief intensifies. We convince ourselves that stopping, even briefly, will cause opportunities to vanish or momentum to stall. Scarcity of time, the mindset that time is slipping away faster than it is. Context. This isn't just about literal clock time. It's about the felt sense of life speeding past, making us rush through experiences instead of inhabiting them fully. Racing a clock that isn't there at 11:47 p.m. You're scrolling through social media and you see another engagement announcement, another job promotion, another friend launching a side business. Suddenly, the quiet evening you were enjoying feels like wasted time. You start mentally drafting a list of things you should be doing, wondering if you've been coasting. The thing is, there's no actual deadline. No one has handed you a timer and said, you have exactly 3 years to get your life in order. And yet the pressure feels real enough to make your chest tighten. We end up racing a clock that exists only in our minds, one built from years of cultural conditioning, comparison, and internalized urgency. It's a race with no clear finish line, which means no matter how fast you run, you'll always feel like you're behind. Personal reflection. I felt this most when scrolling through others' highlight reels. A friend once bought their dream home at an age when I was still figuring out whether I even wanted to stay in one place. Another seemed to have their career mapped out while I was still experimenting with different creative directions. In those moments, my mind would spiral into panic. I'm behind. I've wasted time. I should have done more by now. It didn't matter that my choices were deliberate, or that I was building something meaningful in my way. One vivid example was during the early days of the Inversiverse. Watching other content creators producing new episodes of their content every day, I was quietly working on refining concepts, ideas, understanding them to be prepared for presentation, and implementing them into my life and then recording episodes. It felt slow, almost too slow, but looking back, that season was foundational. Had I rushed to match someone else's pace, I might have built something bigger faster, but not something true to my vision. Psychological insight. This fear is deeply connected to social comparison theory, Festinger, 1954, which suggests we determine our worth and progress by measuring ourselves against others. In the digital era, the comparisons are constant and often skewed toward people's best moments, making our process feel inadequate. It is also tied to temporal self-appraisal theory, Ross and Wilson, 2002, which explores how our perception of time shapes how we evaluate ourselves. The belief that I'm running out of time can create an urgency that overrides long-term thinking, pushing us into choices that align with fear rather than authenticity. I've personally noticed that my time panic spikes during transitional periods, finishing a big creative project, moving to a new place, or even returning from a break. Without something concrete to point to as progress, I start inventing deadlines in my head. One practical shift that helped was reframing time as a resource I could choose to spend, not something constantly leaking away without my control. That small mental reframe made it easier to rest without the low hum of guilt. Insight prompt. When you feel like you're behind, whose timeline are you following? Is it yours? Theory in action. Create a personal milestones list based on your values, not cultural expectations. Review it monthly to remind yourself of the life you're building, not the one you've been told to build. Relearning the rhythm of rest theme. Rest as a radical choice. Treating rest not as laziness, but as an intentional act of self-preservation and creative renewal. In a culture where exhaustion is romanticized as dedication, choosing rest is countercultural. It challenges the idea that our worth is tied to constant output and reframes rest as an essential part of sustainable living. Attributes. Permission to pause. The conscious decision to stop without justifying it. Context. Many of us feel the need to earn rest by first exhausting ourselves. Permitting ourselves to pause, even in the middle of momentum, disrupts the productivity-first conditioning we've internalized. Rest as resistance, rejecting the narrative that being busy is a badge of honor. Context. Choosing to slow down pushes against societal systems that profit from burnout. It's an act of reclaiming your time and energy for yourself, not just your output. Creative recovery, using rest as a tool to restore curiosity, play, and imagination. Context. Rest isn't just about physical recovery. It replenishes the mental and emotional space needed for insight, connection, and new ideas to emerge. From burnout to breathing space. There was a time when I thought rest was something you took after you'd earned it, like dessert after a hard meal. The idea of stopping in the middle of a busy week felt reckless, almost dangerous. But the irony is, the more I delayed rest, the more my work suffered. The spark that made me want to create in the first place would fade, replaced by a dull mechanical routine. I was still producing, but it felt hollow. It's strange how we can convince ourselves that pausing is the enemy of progress. In reality, it's the opposite. Rest is the soil where growth happens. Without it, everything we build runs on borrowed energy. Relearning rest isn't just about taking a nap or a day off. It's about unhooking from the belief that you have to push to breaking point before you deserve to breathe. It's about noticing when your pace is stealing the joy from the very things you're trying to sustain. Personal reflection. I remember one stretch when I was working on multiple creative projects, while also navigating a big personal transition. Every day felt like a sprint. I would tell myself, just get through this week, only to find the next week was just as full. My rest was always on the horizon, never here. One night, after yet another late working session, I sat in my room in complete silence. No laptop, no phone, no agenda, I just sat. At first it was uncomfortable. My mind kept nagging me about the things I wasn't doing. But then something shifted. I realized it had been months since I'd felt stillness. That night didn't fix my overworking habits, but it planted a seed. I started experimenting with small pauses. 10 minutes in the middle of the day to walk outside, one evening a week with no screens, and an entire Sunday without thinking about work. Over time, these pauses didn't just make me feel rested, they made me feel more alive. Ecological Insight Research in Attention Restoration Theory, Kaplan and Kaplan, 1989, shows that periods of rest and exposure to restorative environments, like nature or quiet spaces, help replenish our ability to focus, problem solve, and regulate emotions. Without these breaks, our mental resources deplete, leading to cognitive fatigue and emotional burnout. Another relevant concept is the ultradian rhythm, natural cycles in our bodies that repeat every 90–120 minutes, governing our energy levels. Ignoring these rhythms by pushing through fatigue disrupts not only our productivity, but also our emotional regulation. I've noticed personally that when I honor these natural cycles, taking short breaks throughout the day, stepping outside between tasks, my creative output improves, but more importantly, so does my sense of ease. I'm no longer wrestling my body into submission to meet an artificial pace. Instead, I'm working with it, which feels like a quiet form of freedom. Insight prompt. Where in your life do you postpone rest until you've earned it? And what would happen if you stopped waiting? Theory and action block. One intentional rest period into your week that isn't tied to exhaustion. Protect it like you would any important meeting. Over time, notice how this shift affects your mood, creativity, and sense of enoughness. The piece of choosing enough theme, enoughness as an inner anchor, living from a place where worth and satisfaction are self-defined rather than externally measured. In a hyperworld obsessed with more, the concept of enoughness can feel like giving up. But enoughness is not complacency. It's a conscious refusal to let external measures dictate your sense of peace. Attributes, self-defined success, measuring achievement by your values, not comparison. Context. Many of us inherit definitions of success from family, culture, or peers. Redefining it on your terms breaks the cycle of endless striving for validation you may never actually want. Letting go of just one more, resisting the pull to add, improve, or upgrade without purpose. Context. The just one more mentality keeps us chasing the next thing at the expense of enjoying the current one. Learning to stop on your terms creates space for presence. Contentment as active practice, recognizing and appreciating what you already have. Context. Contentment isn't a passive feeling that arrives by chance. It's an active lens you choose to see through, cultivated by awareness and gratitude. Standing still in a moving world. We live in a culture that doesn't just value momentum, it worships it. Standing still can feel like falling behind, even if you're exactly where you want to be. There's a subtle fear that if you stop moving, the opportunities, connections, and recognition will slip away. But the truth is, life will always offer more roads to run. The question is whether those roads lead anywhere meaningful for you, or whether they're just keeping you too busy to notice you've strayed from your map. I've come to see enoughness not as a ceiling, but as a grounding point. It's the spot you return to when you've wandered too far into the noise. Choosing enough is like planting your feet in the earth while the world rushes past, knowing you don't need to chase every wave to feel alive. This isn't about abandoning growth. It's about choosing growth that's rooted in peace, not panic. The world will keep spinning whether you run in circles or not. The power comes from deciding which movements are worth your energy and which are simply distractions disguised as progress. Personal reflection. I used to think I'd know I'd made it when my calendar was full and my inbox overflowing. It wasn't until I hit a point of near constant exhaustion that I realized I'd been chasing a definition of success that didn't feel like mine. I remember one weekend when I cancelled every plan I had. Instead of filling the time with more productive rest, like reading self-development books or catching up on creative projects, I just existed. I made breakfast slowly. I took a walk without headphones. I went and sat outside in the garden and noticed how the light shifted across the buildings as the day went on. It was the most unremarkable weekend in terms of accomplishments, yet it was one of the most nourishing I'd had in years. In that stillness, I realized that enoughness wasn't a finish line I had to reach. It was a place I could choose to live from right now. Psychological Insight Positive Psychology Research, Lubomirsky, Sheldon and Schcade, 2005, shows that much of our happiness is determined by intentional activities and mindset rather than external circumstances. This aligns with the practice of enoughness. It's less about what you have and more about how you relate to it. From a neurological perspective, hedonic adaptation explains why the excitement of more fades quickly. Each new achievement or acquisition raises the baseline, so we need increasingly more to feel the same satisfaction, unless we actively cultivate gratitude and presence. In my own life, I've seen this cycle play out in creative work. Early in my career, each milestone felt monumental, but without pausing to fully appreciate them, those milestones quickly became the new normal, and the hunger for the next one took over. It wasn't until I began deliberately slowing down to acknowledge what was already here, the relationships, the work, the life I'd built, that I felt a deeper, steadier contentment. Insight prompt. Where in your life are you chasing just one more? And what might it feel like to choose enough instead? Theory in action list 3 areas of your life: work, relationships, and personal growth, and define what enough would look like for each. Keep the definitions visible for a week and notice how they shift your daily choices. Seed to plant. Trusting the pace of your own life theme. Patience as a radical act, allowing your life to unfold at a rhythm that honors your energy, values, and well-being. In a culture that demands urgency, choosing patience isn't passive. It's a deliberate act of trust that what's meant for you will arrive in its time, without constant chasing. Attributes: delayed gratification, finding joy in the process rather than rushing to the outcome. Context: this rewires the brain's reward system, teaching you to value steady progress over quick wins, and to anchor satisfaction in the present rather than the next milestone. Inner timing awareness, recognizing when you're ready versus when you're forcing readiness. Context: just because the world says now doesn't mean it's your time. Developing a feel for your readiness protects you from burnout and misaligned commitments. Faith in natural growth, trusting that meaningful changes take time to root. Context: growth that lasts is rarely instant. Like plants, your life's most important shifts often happen below the surface long before they're visible. The long game of enough. We're conditioned to see life as a sprint, competitive, to hit the targets, collect the milestones, and prove yourself before time runs out. But when you step back, you see that the things that matter most, trust, love, mastery, and healing, rarely work on a deadline. They unfold in seasons, not seconds. There's a quiet strength in resisting the pull of urgency. It's a strength I've had to learn over and over, especially in moments when it felt like everyone else was moving faster. In those times, patience felt like failure, as if slowing down meant I was falling behind. But the truth is, choosing your own pace is the only way to truly live your own life. When you move with your rhythm instead of the world's noise, you start to see how much space there is for rest, for reflection, for unexpected beauty. Enoughness in its deepest form is inseparable from patience. It's the recognition that you're not running out of time, you're exactly where you need to be, and the rest will arrive when it's meant to. Personal reflection. I remember a period when I was desperate for a project to take off. I pushed every angle, late nights, constant updates, chasing opportunities before they were ready. The harder I pushed, the more the work lost its soul. Eventually I stepped back. Weeks passed. Then, without forcing it, the right opportunity came, one that aligned better than anything I could have engineered. It reminded me that not everything responds to hustle. Some things, especially the ones worth keeping, respond to space, trust, and time. Since then, I've tried to treat my life like a garden. Some seasons are for planting, some for tending, some for harvest. You can't make a flower bloom faster by ranting about it, but you can protect the soil and let nature do its work. Psychological insight, developmental psychology, often points to the importance of readiness windows, periods, when a person is naturally prepared for certain growth or change. Trying to force those shifts too early can cause resistance or collapse under pressure. From a neuroscience perspective, patience strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning and long-term thinking. Over time, this makes it easier to resist impulsive choices driven by fear of missing out. In my own life, patience has saved me from jumping into commitments that look perfect in the moment, but would have drained me long term. The more I've trusted that the right opportunities will meet me at the right time, the less I've felt the need to chase everyone that passes by. Insight prompt. What's one area of your life where you can step back and trust the timing instead of forcing it? Theory in action. Choose one goal or desire you've been pushing hard to achieve. For the next month, replace constant pursuit with gentle nurturing, small, consistent actions without urgency, and observe what changes. Closing thoughts. If you've spent years running, slowing down can feel like stopping. But the truth is, you can't lose yourself in stillness. You find yourself there. Enoughness isn't something you stumble upon at the end of the race. It's something you choose, right here, without waiting for the perfect moment or the next achievement. Rest doesn't make you irrelevant. It makes you ready. Contentment doesn't make you complacent. It makes it clear. And peace isn't a reward for doing more. It's the space you protect so you can keep becoming who you are. So this week, notice where you're rushing. Notice where urgency is stealing the joy from the thing you're chasing. And then try something radical. Let it breathe. The world will still be there when you're ready to move again. And when you do, you'll be moving from enough, not toward it. You've been listening to the Unfiltered Human on the Fringe. Until next time, stay human, stay awake, and remember, enough is already here. James Miller. If you found value in today's episode, you may also be interested in my broader project, The Inversiverse, a series exploring the hidden architecture of perception, identity, control, and consciousness. Across 20 episodes, The Inversiverse dissects indoctrination, language, media manipulation, dark psychology, belief systems, and the evolution of self in the digital age. You can find all episodes of The Inversiverse on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and Substack by searching this place called Earth. These ideas aren't shared to convince you, but to invite you to think, feel, and perceive more consciously in a world designed to keep you distracted. Overview of the Inversiverse, a journey through the mirrors of mind, culture, and control. Episodes 1 to 3 introduce foundational ideas around indoctrination, perception, and manipulation. Episode 4 explores how language, symbols, and cultural norms are used to shape thought. Episode 5 investigates control systems, media narratives, and the illusion of choice. Episode 6 to 7 dives into collective belief structures and the psychology of mass behavior. Episode 8 focuses on marketing, control theory, game theory, and critical thinking. Episode 9 covers love, relationships, human mating, gender dynamics, and red-blue pill ideologies. Episode 10 unpacks dark psychology, the occult, Satanism, and the dark triad personality types. Episode 11 The Simulated Self examines identity, ego, and the rise of post-human consciousness. Episode 12 The Spell of the Mind inquires into language, illusion, and physiology of thought. Episode 13 Conscious Seduction journeys through persuasion, propaganda, and the unseen forces of the mind. Episode 14 The Myth of Sanity sheds light on madness, genius, and the edge of perception. Episode 15 The Algorithmic Mind probes influence, identity, and invisible architects. Episode 16 The Noise of Knowing reveals overload, obsession, and the age of infinite information. Episode 17 Belief Machines delves further into language, desire, and the engine of reality. Episode 18 Submerged Signals examines how the unseen shapes the self. Episode 19 The Alchemy Within Traces, Food, Frequency, and the Forgotten Intelligence of the Body. Episode 20 Encoded Flesh scrutinizes and opens up to the forgotten language of the body, DNA, and biological consciousness.